All right, everybody, welcome back to the Be That 1% podcast. Thank you for being here. And today, this episode is going to be dedicated to the 100-mile attempt that took place on March 22nd and 23rd of 2025. It started Saturday, 3 a.m., and I'll walk you through the journey, why I did it, the help that I had, the training, the structure, the adjustments I made, and then ultimately, how it all ended. And so, as always, thank you for being a part of this community. And, the whole point of this podcast is really to share ideas, bring people on, and talk about things that remind you that you are one of one. That is your superpower. That is your uniqueness. That is, really you. There's no other you out there. And there's something beautiful about that. And when we can take the time to sharpen it, to understand it, to deepen it, we can find new layers of vitality, purpose, mastery that we wouldn't think possible, and to go right into why 100 miles? That's ridiculous, James. You've already done 61. You've already done 78. Why 100? My wife asks me that all the time. Well, first of all, the timing of all this was for charity. Every year I like to do something challenging, and it doesn't always mean it has to be physical. It's just this year I felt that I wanted to do something physical, and I wanted to tie it to a charity goal that I had. And so originally this 100 miles was scheduled for December 7th, and that week I felt like deathly ill, and I couldn't even squeeze my fingers together. I had no strength, and I'm like, well, this definitely isn't happening. So from December 7th, we pushed to March 22nd and 23rd. But the origin of why started in charity, and it quickly grew into another challenge. I always love finding my limits, finding what am I capable of, and in a world where we are hyper focused on convenience and comfort, complacency can very quickly leak into every part of your life. And pretty soon you're 20 pounds overweight, you're foggy going into work, your relationship is stagnant, your learning is halted. And it's up to us to be mindful of what we're doing and how we're doing it. And so the challenge, something like 100 miles, forces you to pay attention. It forces me to pay attention and to stay aligned throughout the year, where I eat right, I'm going to the gym, and I'm living a lifestyle that is much like a professional athlete, because if you don't, then you can't have goals like that, right? And so the challenge aspect is the second kind of pillar. And then the third is just no excuses. I don't ever want to be in my life and say, oh, I'm too old, or because I have kids, I can't do something like that. Or, it's just, we're not as young as we used to be, or work's really busy right now. And I wanted to provide an opportunity for people to observe that, with my schedule, which is, 30 plus cities a year, what feels like a different time zone every week to every other week, 2 kids. My wife is going to get her master's degree at UNLV, right? So we don't have time, right? And so I wanted to be like, okay, even with all of that, I want to provide an opportunity that, like, if you really want to do something like that, show up and do it. No excuses. Don't blame your family. Don't blame your job. Don't blame anything else. If you want a certain thing in your life, find a way to at least attempt. And so with those 3 motives, I set out on the course. Training in the running sense was non-existent, if I'm being honest. I was running maybe 20 miles, if that, a week for periods of time. But then as traveling got crazy and just life with kids happens, adjustments need to be made. And for me to go on a 2 hour to 3 hour run, that's me giving up dinner time. That's me not being able to be with my kids. And as someone who wants to be present as a father and someone who wants to be there for as much as I possibly can, that just didn't fit, right? And so so outside of the running, I was consistent at going to the gym and at least getting a workout in. And that workout can be anything from at least a mile to an hour of some sort of mobility, strength training, or like a really demanding like weightlifting strength training session. Mostly strength training and like joint work and mobility work was the predominant modalities, but 328 days straight leading up until this day. So, no days off. And that challenge stemmed from an all men's retreat that I lead called Forge in Costa Rica. A bunch of tip of spear leaders go off grid, connect, mastermind. And one of the ideas was, hey, can we commit to working out every day for a whole year? And it was heavy, it was hard, and it was big, but mostly everybody decided to do it, and we made that goal a thing. So that was the lack of training or training to some degree before the race, and which wasn't much. So that's what it is. Now, the help that I had obviously was my wife Amanda, who is just, she doesn't get enough credit, and I do my best to say thank you as often as I can, because without her, the house would be a total mess and I would not be able to do half of the things that I do. And so I love you. Thank you, Amanda, for everything. So that goes without saying, or it goes with saying. Maggie was my nutritionist who works with professional athletes, Olympians, and she structured a nutritional plan for me to follow 3 days out during the race and then 3 days post and beyond. So shout out to Maggie for your help with that. I mean, the whole race, my energy was solid. And so I think that's a huge testament to her work, but also to the importance of nutrition with something like this. We have Thomas, my chiropractor, who aligned me before the race and met me at certain legs to, again, align, massage, tweak, make any adjustments needed for me to continue to endure the pain, basically. And then afterwards, Adam out of Align PT here in Las Vegas hooked me up with so many modalities, which I'll talk about later. So that was my help. And then on race day, we actually had 10 plus people come out, total, maybe closer to 15. And I never was walking alone, which was really helpful. And Amanda did an incredible job of being with me for basically the first 4 legs. And then everyone else could join. My family, a few friends, some that flew in from different cities. And so that was awesome. Just nothing puts a smile on your face when you're going through a really hard time than seeing people you care about and that care about you show up for something that you're doing that's really hard. And so thank you all for being there and just helping me get through that time. And so the structure, 100 miles, 12 legs, 3 sections, somewhat around the city. It was kind of started in the south, and went to Red Rock, kind of around Red Rock, north into Summerlin, and then back down south. And it was going to wrap around kind of the mid section of Vegas over to the west, and then finish back in the south. It's kind of like how I laid it out. And that's all on my Instagram if you want to look at it. So that was the prep. Then race day, you wake up, I try to go to bed at 6:30 p.m. Good luck. It's still light outside. Got kids in the house. Haven't really adapted my body to go to bed that early. So I didn't even really go to sleep until probably around 10:30, which is my normal bedtime. And then I have to get up at 1:30 because I got to eat and I don't want to be too heavy when I'm running. And I also got to get my stretching and dynamic warm-ups in so that I can hit the ground running at the time of start. So coming off of, at best 3 hours of sleep, I'm going into this experience. So talk about, you just got to do it. No excuses, right? Life happens and you can't complain about it. You just got to go. So there is that. I got aligned by Thomas. My whole body was set, and I had my first pair of shoes that I was starting with, and it was a pair of Nikes marathon shoes. I can find the name, but I'm drawing a blank on what it is. Lightweight, cushiony at the bottom. Good for the first leg, which was about 11.8 miles. Start running, and everything feels good. My strategy is to run 4, walk 1. And I kept that up probably up until about 9 miles. And then I also started the race with some compression sleeves on my knees, which restricted my movement. So I wouldn't do this again if I were to ever do this again, which chances are probably very, very slim. But I wouldn't start with them on. That kind of forced me to run a bit more with my quad than with that full range of motion, activating more the hamstrings and the glutes. So by the time I hit 9-10 miles, I started to feel a little tweak in my knee just from the pull from my quads onto my patella tendon. And I'm like, oh man, I'm not even done with the first leg. I'm already experiencing this. So I adapted by running less and then walking a tad bit more. I'm not even finishing a full mile of walking, but more so like 0.2 mile of a walk, and then a run for, another 1.5 miles, and then walk, and kind of just listen to my body at that pace. And then I finished the first leg. And it was a little cold outside, getting warm in the back, making sure I replenish my gels and my salts and my water, which Amanda had prepped at the location, which again, amazing. And then we start the second leg. And the second leg was grueling. It's a desolate road leading into Red Rock. And man, this is where my knee and just my hip flexor already started with the pain. And I still had the sleeves on. And so, man, I had to tough that out. And that was a 9-mile leg there. So I walked more than I anticipated, but I was keeping track on my watch of like how much time my average mile pace was, because that would tell me if I'm on pace for the whole race. And so I was able to like muscle through that. I arrive at the beginning of the third leg location with ahead of time, so about 15 minutes ahead of time. I'm like, well, that's surprising, given how I'm feeling, that I'm still ahead. Okay, that's good. So I decide I took a Tylenol, and then I adjusted and took my sleeves off of my knees. So that gave me more breathing room with my legs. I rubbed some nice essential oils on my knees and my hip flexors. And then I was probably stayed there for about 7 minutes, and then right back in it for another 7.2 miles to Red Rock Casino from Red Rock Overlook. And this one felt better than the second. I think probably because it was downhill mostly, slightly downhill, which the other one was like slightly uphill. So that definitely makes sense. And so I get to Red Rock Casino 30 minutes ahead, and that's great. But the challenge is that as I'm getting closer, about 4 miles out, I tell Amanda to get an Uber. And so the Uber took a little longer than anticipated. By the time Amanda got to the car, took her back to the car, and then drove the car from where it was to Red Rock Casino, we were on time, like maybe slightly behind time. And then I still had to replenish all my water and snacks and all that. And the challenge is you got to eat, because I'm probably burned close to 2,000 calories by that point. So I got to eat. But anytime I eat like solid foods, it would just be heavy. And so then I would cramp. And so I'm trying to like eat food like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with honey, and and also keep up pace. And that didn't work out the best. And so I had again walked more than I anticipated on that fourth leg, which was 8 miles, I think 8 miles. And that was like on the way to North, like Summerlin, right next to the freeway. And man, that was I was not only feeling heavy from the eating, but I was also behind time. So that was frustrating. I'm trying to catch up, but I can't run that fast because just the wear and tear is starting to take place. And this is, into the high 20s for the miles. So I get to end of leg 4, beginning of leg 5. I'm like mid 30s with the miles, and I'm feeling it. And this is right before the longest leg at 14 miles. And it goes through the roads. So, I have to stop at the stoplights. You're trying to time it the best you can, but, sometimes you just got to wait. And so that interrupts your time too. And that start and stop can be challenging. So, yeah. That 14-mile one did me in right there. That's when I was like, okay, this is a lot harder than I anticipated. Had switched my shoes at the beginning of leg 2, and so those are still holding up. The food, is fine. Thomas did some work on me, so I felt better for the first 6 miles of the 14, but then the compound effect took in, and it was getting hotter, so I had to drink more water and make sure I was having more gels and salt tablets, which again was all fine. That was great, but it's just another thing that you have to be reminded of. And I would later on develop a strategy in that leg of walking from light to light and then running a light to light. So it was like walk, run, walk, run. And that got me to the end of the leg about an hour behind time, which again, frustrating. So I get there and I'm getting worked on again by Thomas. And I'm in my head, I'm like, okay, let's take some audits here, because I'm a little over halfway. I'm about 48 miles in, so close to half. And I got to go another 13 miles on this next leg. So a 14-mile leg and a 13-mile leg. Poor design on my end. I take responsibility for that. Without a break. And at this point, I introduced the walking sticks because I needed that extra support. And if I didn't have them, I would be hobbling. So I needed that extra momentum push to keep the stride longer. And so that's how I started that. I think it was the 6th leg. And that's how I did it for that whole time. And that was the transition from light to dark outside. And this is also at the end of this leg, the 13-mile leg, I started to chafe down there. My legs were rubbing apart, like rubbing against each other. And by the time I hit mile 10, so this is probably about mile 57, I'm starting to feel that wear and tear of my skin. And I had oil, so I put some oil on, but it wasn't doing anything. It was just super sensitive. And I'm like, okay. And I had a group of people with me, so that kept me going. And I would walk with those sticks as much as I could, and then I would run because I had to stay at least somewhat close to the pace. And so it was probably, of the 13 miles there, I probably walked 8 and maybe 9 and ran 3. No, and ran 4. If I even were to, maybe it's less running and more walking, but at least 9 miles walking. And by the end of that, I was done walking. My feet were starting to swell. The hip flexors were pretty much shot. And my knees were starting to hurt. So I had put my compression sleeves back on, and I had switched my shoes to the On Clouds because they had a little wider toe box as opposed to the Nike Vomeros that I was wearing for the second pair. And so at around mile 58, so 2 miles from the end of that 13-mile leg, the thoughts of, okay, how much longer started to enter my mind. And I was like, I even was talking to some of the guys. I'm like, all right, guys, like this conversation is starting up. It's like, okay, you're behind, almost 3 hours. You got 42 more miles to go, and you're feeling like this. And I'm trying not to like entertain it, but I also want to talk it out because I don't want it to stay. So I'm like trying to find that balance there. And the guys were super supportive. They're like, look, man, like you've already won technically by doing this. Like you're doing things that most people don't do. So like that's a win already. But like I get you want to challenge yourself, and I also want to challenge you. So you just kind of got to feel it in the moment and feel what's right. I'm like, yeah. So I tough it out to the end of that leg, to the beginning of the 7th leg. And this is at M Resort now. And it's nighttime. It's probably 9 p.m. And I'm shivering in the back of the car. I could barely even get myself onto the bed of the car to get worked on from massage, and food is like last thought in my mind. It's just kind of I'm just laying there like my eyes closed like, oh my gosh, what is going on? And this is mile 60. And that was a big, dig deep moment because like, everyone's trying to give me love and support and like, not trying to say too much, but also like make sure that they're saying the right amount. And in my mind, I'm like, I gotta find something to go. I gotta go deeper. I gotta find something, and I take it back. That wasn't mile 60 at the end of that. That was mile 64, 63 and change, 63 and change and to 64 miles at that point. And I'm like, man, I'm dying here. Like, and I'm moving slow. Like I'm talking a 30 to 33 minute mile. That is slow. And so you start thinking about how many miles you have to go and the time that it takes to do those miles. And I can't run. Like running is out of the equation. So I'm trying not to think too much about it. I get up, I get my walking sticks, and I take a caffeine gel to see if caffeine will do anything. And I walked to the next spot, which was 2.5 miles away. And that one felt okay. Like it felt like, all right, I'm here, I'm doing this, I'm toughing it out. I got a tiny bit of a caffeine boost, plus the Tylenol that I just took. That's just one foot in front of the other, one foot in front of the other. I get to that end of that spot, and I sit down, and I got the guys rubbing my legs. I'm like doing all the work, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like 66 miles and change. And I'm like, let's keep walking. Let's keep going. Just don't think about it. And I get to the beginning of the other leg, and it's in Inspirata, dark roads. Got my light lamp on. Everyone's got, their gear to alert people that were out there. And about a half a mile in, that conversation comes up like, James, we really got to talk here. What are we doing? You know, and I was also talking about this with my friend Angela, so shout out for holding space. Like how do you want to play this? Okay? Cuz we got about 33 miles left and you still got to go all the way across the other part of the city. To a place you've already been. How much do we want to push here? Because your body's starting to fall apart, your chafing's getting worse. It's like just completely raw. And we're on the verge of potentially getting injured here. And all these thoughts just kept coming up of like, okay, if I quit, am I a quitter? Am I like someone who just couldn't finish the job? You know, and what are people going to think when I'm like telling everybody I'm going to run 100 miles and I don't even get to 70? I don't even do as many as I did last time, which was 78. How does that look? Come on, man. Like you can go, you know? And so that was a part of me. And I wrestled with that for 3 miles. I'm like, I can't stop. I don't want to stop. Like I'm not someone who stops, you know? And then fast forward to that point in time and it was like, yeah, I know that, but like at what cost are you willing to keep going? Let's play this out. You push for another 5 miles to the next location where you get a break. Then what? Then you're going to have even more pain. You're going to chafe even more. And for what? To say that you did 5 more miles, which is really all I had in the tank at that time. And then you also got to think about the recovery time. You want to be a dad. You want to be present. You don't want to risk an injury that lasts for 2 or 3 months and then be out of not being able to attend your son's baseball games or not being able to lift your kids, not even be able to, you know, be romantic with your wife. Like, what's worth it? You know, I get you want to do hard things and I get you want to push limits, but you also got to learn the lesson of when enough is enough. You got to learn the dosage. And this is something that my mentor and great friend, Dr. Mark Guadagnoli, talks about with the intelligent struggle. It's like the Goldilocks, you know, theory of like just right. You push too far, you break the system. You don't push enough, you don't activate it. And so at that moment in time, I had reached the tipping point of, okay, if you continue, things are going to start unraveling. And yeah, you may crawl until you have nothing left. But again, what's the recovery time going to look like? What's the risk of injury going to look like? And whose burden are you now going to be because you had more of your ego activated in that you needed to finish because of how it looked, as opposed to knowing when enough is enough. And you got the dose, you got the medicine. And so I realized that I was operating more in ego in pushing the limit than really listening to my body. And that was a moment of maturity for me. That, you know, like, hey, for the fact that you didn't have any training and you made it this far is amazing. On top of everything else that you're doing. Amazing, dude. Like, you got to acknowledge that. You got to see that. You know, 4 years ago, and this is also at different times. I didn't have Oakley. And Aiden was only a year old. You know, like that was a different time, a different thought process, a different decision-making tree that existed then that now exists. I have responsibilities that I got to think about. And when I look at, you know, a lot of ultra runners or people who do crazy things, you know, a lot of them don't have families or significant others. And so it's easier to make those types of decisions to go to those limits. But when you are steeped in a lot of responsibility, personally and professionally, like you got to find that right dosage. And I found it. And it was hard to make that decision. Like part of me felt like I was letting myself down and everyone else down. But then on the other side, it was like, this is the first time, maybe ever, that with something this extreme that you've said, I got it. This is enough. And that was a heart decision there. That was a listening to my body decision. And, in retrospect now, I'm like, good job, James. That was the right call. And my recovery has been great since. A week out now. I haven't missed any family time. It hasn't restricted me from being the type of dad that I want to be. And so for the fact that I can go and do something like that and still not miss with being the father and the husband that I want to be and the businessman that I want to be, that was as beautiful an orchestration of challenge as I could muster up. And so I'm really proud of that. And yeah, I mean, this compared to all my other runs, this one was harder in the lack of training, harder in the sense of, I mean, mostly it's the training. I feel like if I actually train like this, how most ultras train, where it's like a year, then I firmly believe I would have finished 100%. But given the circumstance, it is what it is. And then it was easier in some ways because I was more wiser and I was able to leverage my body. And because I had done 328 days of training prior, and even before that, a year before that, really focusing on flexibility and mobility and being in the best shape of my life right now overall, I think that also supported me in everything as well. And so, I'm not fond of using age as an excuse, and I'm not using that here. It's more so like, hey, I'm 35 and I can still do things like this, even with my schedule. And so if anything, it showed me like age is just what we think it is. If I think, oh man, I'm 35 and I'm not a spring chicken anymore, then that somehow does affect how I pursue things. And now I'm not blind to, how maybe quicker my body was at recovery when I was younger, but also how much more wiser I am in using my body in the right ways now that can keep me in these types of challenges for as long as I want to be in them. So yeah, I'm very blessed to have gone through this. It was a learning experience for sure. My wife has jokingly, well, maybe, no, I think she's serious. She's like, this is the last one. I'm like, it is. I get it. Of running. I can't promise you. No, I'm basically telling you this won't be the last challenge, but the last running one of this caliber, yes, I can agree to that. Because something like this, it does take a community, and a lot of the weight does fall on my team, and especially Amanda. And so that's not fair for me to constantly be putting that on her. As I am selfishly only thinking about me, I also got to think about the family and how my actions and my decisions and my visions do affect them, which, is also complex and heavy and difficult at times. So it's a learning process. I'm not saying I have it mastered, but that's just kind of my experience of it all, and learning when you got enough. And that's a really big challenge for most people. And I think it comes down to I'm not saying every time, but a lot, I think it does come down to ego. Are you a quitter, or are you a winner, or are you fill in the blank? And those all come from societal perceptions or pressures that we have to do something. We don't have to do anything. We get to do what we want to do. And you, get to make the call on whatever it is that you're doing. So yeah, although 100 miles was the goal and my training did not match that 100, I'm still going for it, and I think there's also something admirable about still attempting. Even though you may know, like, hey, I may not finish, but here we go. Oh, I wanted to also say that the Align PT work was really nice. Like, so afterwards, I didn't even go over after I finished. I went to In-N-Out, double with fries and chocolate shake, delicious. And I went home, slept with my knees slightly elevated with some compression socks, and began the recovery process. The first 24 hours was me just getting a lot of sleep and eating a lot of protein, a lot of the right nutrients that Maggie had mapped out. So that was helpful. I was walking, but with a cane, or walking sticks. And then the second day is when I went in and got the work done. And there's a machine called Indiba. It's an electromagnetic current that comes from this device, and these frequencies go into your muscles and raise the temperature. And that rise in temperature triggers the body's natural regeneration, repair, and defense responses. And so it makes the recovery process faster. So I had that done, which was incredible. Not a lot of PTs have that device. And so, kudos to Align. I got a soft tissue massage. I got dry needling, cupping, and then a stim machine, which is like an electricity kind of on your body that just stimulates the muscles. But they put it in water, and that, I guess, the transference of the electricity, like it's not, I don't know if the electricity is the right word, because obviously you'd be electrocuted in water, but somehow the current is able to travel through the water, through your skin to the muscle and hit it a different way, which I guess is more beneficial. So sat in a bucket of water there for 10, 15 minutes. And so it was like an hour of just recovery, and it felt like a high-end spa. And I was like, oh man, this feels so good. Painful, but good. And that really, really helped. And so day 3, I was basically back to normal and moving, no restrictions. And then day 4 at the gym, day 5 at the gym, a walk, day 6, which is today, at the gym. And now we're back. I still have some tightness, which I'm working through with my mobility and flexibility, but ultimately feeling ready, feeling grateful, and walking away with more wisdom, which is the whole point. So hope this was helpful. Hope you got a lot from the share. And till next time, go out there, challenge yourself in the right dose, and be one of one, because that's who you are. And I'll talk to you guys later. Much love.